Last on Everdark. Julian was tasked with getting out of the museum, unseen and undiscovered by humanity. But Callie had other ideas. We now turn back to the Everdark, where Balthazar must try to turn Callie to their side, and Christian can only watch. Episode 115. All news is good news. Balthazar kissed Christian's forehead. Even though part of Christian wanted to melt against his master, another part of him was standing quite straight and unmelting, almost rigid, one might say. Christian, you cannot help me in this. Balthazar repeated again about his determination to not let Christian watch, let alone participate in changing Callie's mind.
Well, true, watching you would be a learning experience in the use of the Iros gift. What you really mean is that you don't wish me to see you do this thing, because you believe I'll find it morally reprehensible.
Christian corrected Balthazar's words. A smile tugged at Balthazar's lips, but it soon disappeared as his master sighed. Breaking and reforming a mind is a terrible thing.
You're looking forward to it.
Christian corrected again. Maybe a little bit, Balthazar admitted, then shook himself. But Callie has it coming.
But do you not have complicated feelings about this yourself? Callie inhabited Roan's body. He is your sire and—
He is not my sire. Balthazar cut him off, showing the first bit of temper, not at Christian, but at the situation. I am an immortal. I have no sire. Christian wanted to point out that this was not true. Well, it was true from a certain point of view. But what was actually true was that Balthazar had extremely complicated feelings about Roan and Callie. There were memories surfacing from the time that he and Callie had been immortals before, in addition to the ones from the time that Roan had been alive. Balthazar clasped Christian's biceps and looked down at him fondly. I know you are worried about me.
Yes, as anyone would be who cares for you.
Christian looked over at Daemon and addressed the king.
You know that this will not be easy for him, Daemon. You know it will dredge up terrible things.
Daemon's red eyes slowly blinked, rather like a cat's. Christian knew that the vampire king was seeing something that was not the forest in the Everdark, but someplace else, maybe even some time else. But he focused on Christian and Balthazar then. He came over, a soft smile on his face. He cupped Christian's face with one hand and Balthazar's with the other. Yes, it will be difficult and painful, Christian, you are right. And I understand your desire to spare Iros these experiences, Daemon said. Christian shifted uncomfortably.
When you describe what he's supposed to do to Callie in those terms, it seems that my desire to keep him safe is wrong.
I will be fine, Christian. Balthazar tried to comfort him. Christian met Daemon's red-eyed gaze. They both knew Balthazar would not be fine. But Daemon seemed to think that he could not be spared this experience either. Christian licked his lips and opened his mouth to speak, closed it, and then opened it again.
Can't you do it, Daemon?
Christian, Balthazar scolded gently. Christian put one hand around Daemon's that was still on his face.
You could do this without harm to yourself. Balthazar could learn to deal with his past in a different way, another way.
We do not ask the king to do things for us. And I can totally handle this, Balthazar cried, going from loyal retainer to offended master, all in 2 sentences. He says these things because he loves you, Iros. Do not chastise him for that, Daemon murmured. He ran his thumb along Christian's cheek. Some things cannot, should not, be avoided.
You see something then? Some reason he has to do this?
Christian asked. His eyes roved over Daemon's face, even as he didn't seek to enter the vampire king's mind. That would be a step too far, a line he would never cross. Daemon's gaze went distant again, and his lips pressed together for a moment before he focused once more on the present before him. I see. Sometimes it is hard to know when to step in and when to allow another to act. Balthazar was frowning. You're not just talking about me now, are you? Daemon shook his head. Callie has beset the museum where Julian is.
What?
The word burst explosively out of Christian's mouth, and he rose up on his toes as if ready to run there. His eyes searched the nearby area for Fiona. She would have to teleport them there since Daemon still needed to conserve strength. Kali is controlling corpses. Ones Kali is creating as well as ones they simply sent there, and Julian is in the front lines against them, Daemon stated. Fiona, you need to take us to the museum, immediately, Balthazar called. Fiona, who had been studying the ground where the gate had been, popped up from her half-crouched position and hustled over to them. It was interesting to see her and Balthazar so aligned. Christian was glad for it, but he did wonder what their past was like together, this life and the one before it.
Of course,
She said, and prepared to teleport them back to Earth. But Daemon held up a restraining hand. Julian is not yet asking for assistance, but he does not wish to distract me from our main goals. Julian would rather gnaw his arm off than disturb you, Balthazar said with an affectionate eye roll. And besides, he is the hero type. Throwing himself into danger to deal with things alone is sort of his thing. That was a very good description of his best friend, though Christian hastened to add,
Julian can deal with most things. He really is quite capable.
Exactly. Daemon agreed. Which is why you want to let him face a zombie horde alone? Balthazar's eyebrows rose up into his hairline. Daemon's lips twitched. Now I know how Christian felt earlier. For when you phrase it that way, it appears me leaving Julian to face this alone would be wrong.
Can Julian face this alone?
Caemorn asked. He hadn't offered to go face the zombie horde, Christian noticed, but he had been willing to, which was new for the former preceptor. He is doing quite well, actually, Daemon said, and there was pride in his voice. Besides, he is not altogether alone. There are quite a few vampires there, but if I were to go... His eyes went unfocused again.
You're definitely seeing the future, aren't you?
Fiona asked. Daemon moved his head to the side as if his neck were bothering him. Christian guessed that there was no physical ailment he was suffering from. I see many paths. All lead to one conclusion, Daemon admitted. I merely wish to pick the best path for Julian. The zombie horde is going to cause a panic and reveal us, unless it is dealt with immediately, Balthazar said with a rather amused and horrified look on his face. You're really going to put that all on Julian's shoulders? The boy's great, but he's new. Let me go at least, and use mind control on the crowd, and... You have a job to do here, Daemon said with a nod towards Kali's two forms. That can... No, it cannot wait, Balthazar, Daemon said. The reason the zombie horde and the police are at the museum is because Kara killed all those people. Balthazar's eyes widened. Christian saw a flood of images from Daemon's mind as he shared what happened at the museum to both of them in detail he had not before. Cold sweat popped up on Christian's brow as he realized what Kara had done, and how she could be simply the point of the spear unless Kali's people were stopped. We cannot delay dealing with Kali, Christian, or there will be plenty of bodies for Kali to puppeteer, Daemon said. Balthazar reluctantly nodded and turned to look back at Kali's other forms. I need to do this, don't I? Yes, unfortunately. And it will help you to work through some things, Daemon said. Balthazar's eyebrows rose again, and he had a rather puckish look on his face. You think I have master issues? Daemon squeezed Balthazar's shoulders. I think in time you will realize that you have me, and all those others do not matter as much. You know, on other lips, those words might sound arrogant, sort of like your I am king shtick. But Balthazar didn't sound, and did not believe, that they were. Funny how you happen to be right about all of that. Funny. Daemon nodded.
Then I will go,
Caemorn said as he stepped forward.
There is none better than me, save yourself, my king, to deal with the dead.
But Daemon shook his head again. No, Caemorn. You must locate all of Kali's other forms and find Julian's parents. I would urge you to return to the spire and meditate. Julian will be far more grateful for you to do that. Caemorn bowed.
Then I will do just that. Call me if I am needed.
He paused for a moment and met Christian's gaze before saying,
We will continue our studies later.
Yes,
Christian said.
I would like that.
He also guessed that it was something he would have to do. With Kali vampires being their main enemies right now, anyone that could interact with the dead was going to be in high demand. And with that, Caemorn sped off back the way they had come, to the spire.
Most of my stories have a lot of fluff and humor, even the vampire ones. But if you're in the mood for an occult gay romance that's darker, you might like one of my completed members-only stories, Labyrinth. Here's the summary. When Rowan Winter was 18 years old, his parents murdered his sister and carved a labyrinth symbol into his chest. As members of the Labyrinth cult, their parents believed Rowan and his sister's souls had been replaced by dark ones. But FBI agent Jack Corbin rescued Rowan even as the rest of the cult were consumed by fire. Jack found himself drawn into a dark passion with Rowan, but ended the relationship as he feared he was causing the young man more harm than good. Now, 10 years later, Rowan is a world-renowned expert in cults, while Jack has risen in the ranks of the FBI. Neither thinks to see each other again until a body is found, with the same labyrinth symbol cut into its chest that was carved into Rowan's body. Has the Labyrinth cult returned? But more importantly, were they right about Rowan being a demon? Labyrinth is a fast-paced story at 37 chapters, one of my rare shorter tales, and is unlikely to come out as a book. If you want to read it, you can join the subscription. Link to the Labyrinth is in the notes, and definitely check out the amazing artwork.
What about Fiona and me?
Christian challenged. You are not going anywhere, Balthazar snapped. Or rather, Fiona will take you back to Ravenscroft Manor, where you will be safe and—
Balthazar, if I can't stay here with you, then I'll go help Julian.
Christian interrupted.
I'm not a child to be sent to my room.
You're not going to fight zombies, Balthazar stated emphatically. Christian ignored him and looked at Daemon.
And will you come with Fiona and me, Daemon?
Yes, I will come. I will watch, though, Daemon stated simply.
You fear that interceding will make Julian doubt himself?
Christian guessed. Another nod. He must be allowed to grow without my presence forever over him. It is not good for a spirit such as his to let another fight his battles for him. And once I act, things will change. Daemon, you won't let anything bad happen to Christian, will you? Balthazar's lips quivered, and Christian knew he wanted to argue about Christian going at all. Christian grabbed Balthazar's arm and squeezed it.
You can't ask him that. It's clear that there are already things about this moment that will greatly affect the future.
Christian could feel the momentous nature about the decisions that Daemon would make next.
He's contemplating when and how humans will know about us, and how he will reveal himself as king of all.
Christian realized. I don't care, so long as you are safe. Balthazar gripped him back just as tightly. The intensity in his master's eyes had Christian blinking. Christian shook his head, still thinking of humanity discovering that vampires exist, and how that would upend everything from governments to religions to the very concept of death and life. He said to Balthazar,
But I'm not the most important thing that Daemon has to consider.
You are to me, Balthazar stated into his eyes, and Christian looked away. There were too many emotions here. His chest felt tight with them. A few seemed lodged in his throat. So much had happened that night. It would be good to simply fight a clear-cut enemy and not deal in the shadows. Zombies, he could do. Balthazar was speaking to Daemon then. You know what he means to me, Daemon. I would ask that you treat Christian as I would treat my own fledgling. Daemon filled in for him. Ha! I do not know about that, Balthazar said with a rather wild laugh. You are having your fledgling fight zombies? Yes, I am. Daemon's gaze went distant. I wish I could say that keeping him away from such a battle would be an overall good thing, but no. No, it would not be. But Christian is my heart, and Julian is mine. Daemon's eyes burned redly. Balthazar lowered his head. Yes, of course. I know that. But you can see the future. I can only read minds, and God knows from what I've seen over the years, I fear there is nowhere safe.
Then he must learn to defend himself, and he can only do that by learning and facing those situations.
Fiona murmured. Says the woman who can get away from any fight. Balthazar tipped his head back and looked at the stars and double moons of the Everdark.
It's either fighting zombies or watching you take Callie apart,
Christian said simply. There are no just A and B choices, Christian. Balthazar continued to look up at the stars.
Those are the only choices I will accept.
Christian answered with a shrug. You are impossible. Balthazar sighed. He lowered his head. His silver-eyed gaze was sharp. You will promise me to get out. Get Julian out if things go south. Fiona, he pointed a finger at her. I asked you before to keep an eye on him.
I know.
Fiona lifted her hands.
But until you arrived, he wasn't in too terrible of danger.
Me? Am I responsible for... Christian silenced Balthazar with a kiss. That seemed best. When he pulled back, his master's eyes were closed, and the tension was mostly drained out of him.
All will be well with me,
Christian assured him, even as he wasn't sure if things would be all right with Balthazar.
Shall we go?
Fiona asked. Yes. It will be a good opportunity for Christian to learn more about being a speaker to the dead, Daemon assured Balthazar. Just as they teleported from the Everdark to the museum, Christian heard Balthazar say, That is not reassuring, Daemon. And Daemon had chuckled. But that chuckling was soon drowned out by the squawk of police radios, dozens of people talking, more like shouting, and the whap-whap-whap of rotor blades. The night sky was filled with helicopters, like miniature suns with their powerful spotlights that sliced through the darkness around the museum. There was, in fact, little darkness left as the crowd of media filled the entirety of the 4-lane highway that ringed the city. The cameras were rolling. The reporters were talking breathlessly. Christian heard one of the female reporters in a tight black skirt suit tell her viewers,
Police will not confirm if there are any deaths inside the museum yet. No one has emerged from the museum itself. The attendees of tonight's charity event include the mayor, several aldermen and women, judges, and their families.
Her voice drifted off, as Christian heard a male reporter who looked to be in his 50s with sobering frost at his temples say,
No police have entered the building. We have information that they are waiting for a specially trained team. No word if this is a SWAT unit or, as some are saying, a hazmat unit.
Another voice took his place. Another man that Christian recalled watching all his life. The man had done an interview with him and Julian recently. He called out Christian's name.
Christian! Christian Thorne! It's Robert Devon! Could you come here and speak to me and our viewers? Were you inside the museum tonight, Christian? What happened in there?
Christian's shoulders hunched. Fiona had teleported them just behind the line of police vehicles and in front of the cameras. She looked rather horrified herself by where she had touched them down. Luckily, no one appeared to have noticed that they appeared out of thin air. There were, however, no zombies in sight, which was both good and bad. Good because it meant that there were no zombies being filmed. Bad because they were not near the action where Julian was in his fight against the undead.
Fiona, why did you bring us here?
Christian hissed, even as Daemon was standing beside them both, looking completely at ease. Fiona's shoulders tensed.
Because I've only ever passed by the museum. I've never been inside or around the back, so...
So you took us to where you knew. Okay, right.
Christian let out a Balthazar-level sigh.
We need to make our way...
Christian! Christian, please come over and talk to us!
Robert Devon was now waving his microphone in the air. The other media people had realized that there was someone there that wasn't police and could just be a museum goer. Lights suddenly were fixed on him instead of the media personalities and wide shots of the museum and law enforcement.
Get Daemon out of here, Fiona, before they notice, him.
Christian was going to say Daemon's red eyes, but really every part of Daemon was just not normal. He was too big, too built, too beautiful. He stood out as alien, as godlike, really.
What are you going to do?
Fiona hissed back.
I'm going to do some interviews, evidently.
Christian said before he turned on his heel, plastered a faint smile on his face, and strode over to the mob of reporters. He felt, rather than saw, Fiona and Daemon fade into the crowd of police and other emergency personnel. He wondered if anyone had noticed Daemon. Someone would have. Someone would make crazy conspiracy theory videos with the footage on YouTube. But he hoped the mainstream press and more legitimate alternative media wouldn't. Christian stopped at the police-taped media line and gave Robert his blandest of smiles.
Christian,
Robert said in that made-for-television voice, which was both deep and reassuring, but also somewhat elitist at the same time.
For our viewers, this is Christian Thorne. He and Julian Harrow have the popular web series called Existence.
The way he said their show's name, and the use of the word web before series, had Christian remembering that their earlier interview might not have gone so well.
Were you in the museum tonight?
A boom mic hovered over him and the reporter. It wasn't just Robert's camera woman filming him either, but every camera was on him. Christian swallowed. He hated being in front of the camera, saving that bit for the more charismatic and natural Julian to play. But here he was, front and center. He slid his hands into the pockets of his pants. He wasn't dressed to go to the gala. He hoped there were no bloodstains or anything else on his clothing.
No, I was actually here to...
Christian didn't get a chance to finish his sentence as Robert chimed in.
Look for proof of the existence of vampires?
Robert's grey eyes twinkled.
I hope there are no vampires responsible for this.
The earlier interview had definitely not gone well. He remembered it very well now. Robert Devon had been rude, patronizing, and outright mocking then. The fact that their show got higher viewerships than his, well, that just made Robert intent on cutting those internet celebrities down to size. Julian hadn't cared, as he had said something to the equivalent that all news was good news if it brought attention to them and their show.
Is it really appropriate to make light of what is clearly a tragedy?
Christian asked coolly with an arched eyebrow. There were a few soft guffaws in the background as people agreed with his take.
Of what size and kind we may not know, but it is clear that it is one.
Robert reddened and cleared his throat.
Well, yes, quite. I didn't mean to... In any event, you weren't inside?
No, I was coming to get a friend.
Christian said.
Julian Harrow is inside.
Robert jumped to that conclusion. It was Christian's turn to redden. He tried to answer in the negative, but the reporters were all talking at once about Julian, Julian's parents, the tragedies, Julian's vow to expose vampires.
I need to get control of this.
Christian reached out with his mind, as Balthazar had taught him to do, to try and calm the reporters. But the moment that he opened his mind, he was blasted with all of their thoughts. He nearly crumpled from the pure psychic blast of their excitement. But he dug his fingernails into his palms and fought to stay upright.
Shut down, shut down, shut down!
Christian ordered himself, but it wasn't until a cool hand landed lightly on his shoulders that the voices quieted. He opened his eyes. He hadn't known that he had shut them. He had, evidently, tightly shut them and turned his head to see who had saved him. It was Elgar. Relief flooded him before alarm followed just as quickly on its heels, because Elgar was wearing sweatpants, a hoodie, no shoes, and of course he had his favorite accessory, Iros's skull, tightly nestled against his chest.
Oh no. Elgar, thanks, but you really need to not be here right now.
Christian told his blood brother. Elgar shook his head. You need me. It is all right.
No, these people are going to have questions about, you and,
Christian barely tipped his head to the skull. He didn't want to alert any of the reporters who hadn't seen the skull already. It is all right. Elgar smiled dreamily, and he leaned towards Robert, who was staring at him with the look of a man confronted with what he thought was a freak and couldn't quite hide his reaction. Robert, though, leaned forward too, and Elgar whispered into his ear. Christian didn't hear what Elgar said, but when Robert straightened up, there was a blankness in his expression. He turned and whispered to his camera woman, then to another person and another person. They were all whispering to one another. The pack of reporters then turned in unison and completely ignored them, or more like, acted like they weren't there, and had never been there.
Whisper. He's got the power to whisper. I remember being told that.
Christian realized, and he also realized what a powerful gift that was. Elgar led Christian away from the scrum, saying in a happy tone, "Come, Christian, the zombies are this way." Join us next time for episode 116, Master Issues.
When you buy a book or join my membership, it's not only a way to keep the lights on and pay my staff. Your money is proof that what I do is truly valuable to you, and I've never lost sight of that. I'm always honored that you choose to spend your time, attention, and money with Wraith Rain instead of the thousands of other choices you have, including just doing nothing. There are authors who are killing it on Amazon, but that's not, well, for me. I prefer to be able to see your name when you subscribe or make a purchase, and I love to see your comments both on YouTube and at the end of chapters. We have a real community, and that's what I've always wanted. My small team and I will continue to do the best we can to entertain you with tales of heroism, romance, justice, and adventure. Thank you so much for your support.